Susan Boyer. I'm senior pastor of the Laverne Church of the Brethren, and it's my privilege to be able to be here with you and to open and close our time together. I just want to put out a quick reminder to turn your cell phone on silent. Thank you. I want to welcome all of you, Ortmeyers, Nailers, close friends. We are also aware that there are several joining us by Zoom, and we want to make sure that you all feel welcomed. Marilee, Bo, and Cody are grateful that you have taken time this afternoon to join them. It is good and right that that should happen on the day of the Kentucky Derby, one of Steve's favorite days of the year. So in respect of Steve and in the midst of Derby festivities, this is a day to speak of Steve with joy, with laughter, tears, with gratitude. You'll have a chance to do that in just a little while. But first, I just want us to stop and acknowledge that in this close family, there has been another huge loss, the death of Erica Corlin Bowles. Corlin described Erica as spirited, spicy, feisty, fun-loving, adventurous, and action-packed. So into this time of memory sharing, we speak Erica's name with appreciation for all that she was and remind you to surround her family with your love. I want to take a few moments to share that what we will be doing today. When I am done, Marilee will go first, and she will share about Steve. And then Steve and Marilee's sons, Bo and Cody, will each take a turn to speak. And then Larry Kennan, will, one of Steve's close friends, will have his turn to share. And they've come prepared to speak into this time. And then we open it up to the rest of you. Know that if you're here and you're going to speak, you need to come up here. There's a microphone that'll be clipped on you, and there's a camera here so the people on Zoom get to see you as well. So you'll need to come up here. For those on Zoom, they will have a chance to speak as well in the second part, and we will accommodate as much of you as there is time and technology allows. Since there are many memories of Steve to share among those of you both physically and virtually present, I ask you to be aware that there are others who want to speak after you. We want to hear from as many as possible today. So in my experience, I'll just say to you, try not to share everything you've ever done with Steve in your entire life. I've been at those memorial services. Think of a quality of Steve that you most want to lift up, or a story that describes the quintessential Steve Ortmayer. Be sure to introduce yourself and your relationship to Steve so that everyone here and on Zoom will know who you are. And I'm hoping that as you move from this time to the Derby, to dinner together, the memories and the stories of Steve will continue to spill forth among you. I just want to say too how impressed I am with a family that can pull off this kind of logistics. You are amazing, amazing planners. I invite you to bring your whole self here this afternoon. Bring all of your memories, your grief, and your gratitude to this time. This is your time as the family and close friends of Steve Ortmayer, a quiet and deeply analytical man of intelligence who could be sentimental without a display of emotionality, who was always doing things for others, and it didn't matter to him whether you knew it or not, whose ego was driven by achievement, and who was fiercely loyal and loved you all so very, very much. So in honor of all that he was and still is, we gather to speak his name and to share your memories. And so that to that end, I invite you to join me in a time of prayer, that we might recognize God's presence here, and that what we have gathered to do is so very, very sacred. Will you join me in prayer? Oh, holy and loving God, as we gather to remember and honor the life of Steve Ortmayer, we ask you to be as close as our own heartbeats, as present as our own breathing. We thank you for all the memories of Steve that this group of family and friends hold sacred. Comfort them in the places that they feel Steve's absence most profoundly. Celebrate with them all the gifts that his life brought to them and embrace them as they strive to carry on the legacy he leaves behind. Oh, gracious God, this is our prayer, and we pray it in a spirit of love and deep gratitude. Amen. Well, Marilee, I invite you to come up and go. Yeah,
Do I want to speak into it or clip it?
if it's better, otherwise you're touching it.
And hold on to that? Okay.
Yep.
Good afternoon. My first date with Steve was 56 years ago on Valentine's weekend at a Betsy Ross ice cream parlor. And it was a double date with Steve's good friend, Mike Tomachoff, and one of my roommates. Mike, who was also my friend, had been trying to get me and Steve together. So finally, here we were. It was my freshman year at University of Laverne. I was 19 and Steve turned 21 the very next day. Steve at the time had a crew cut, wore white socks, and was a football player. The previous year, I had returned to the United States from Switzerland. The boys that I had crushes on were all dark, brooding intellectuals who hung out at sidewalk cafes and smoked. I certainly wasn't going to end up with an American jock. Grades had just come out, and sometime during that evening, Mike turned to Steve and said, "So what did you get, Ort, a 4.0? And my first reaction was that that was so very cruel to be making fun of this dumb football player. But then I realized Mike wasn't kidding, and Steve really had gotten a 4.0 as an English literature major. I had missed something. Turned out I missed a lot. Steve was not a what you see is what you get guy. He had deep hidden layers. His surface was calm, except on the football field. But underneath his quiet surface was a mind that was always planning and analyzing. He was full of contradictions. He was an Eagle Scout who had no use for the outdoors unless it was a football stadium or a golf course. He didn't care about money except to do what he wanted to do. He was always giving money away or loaning it to someone. Planning and saving bored him. He had no idea what our bills were or how things got paid for. And yet, in his professional life, he negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts, was an expert on the salary cap, and controlled the budgets for 2 separate NFL teams. He loved statistics, especially studying the racing form. He was an optimist. He believed you could overcome almost anything by willpower and hard work. Mostly he succeeded. But he could also make me crazy because he didn't always live in reality. If he was 30 miles away, he'd say, "I'll be home in 5 minutes." And if anyone asked him before a game who was going to win, he always answered with the team he was coaching, and he believed it. Most coaches are like that. He wasn't handy. He couldn't, and mostly he wouldn't fix anything. He never learned to type, and technology, including his phone, was a mystery to him. Yet he had a photographic memory, and he could give elaborate quotes verbatim. He remembered specific plays from football games 40 years ago, and he could recite the bloodlines for every thoroughbred in the Kentucky Derby. Finally, Steve loved his family. He loved them even more than he loved In-N-Out, and that's a lot. Steve loved Bo and Cody just for who they are. This is the tough part. In his final days, he would often express that the thing that gave him the most joy was his sons. He was also very vocal in his love for me and appreciative of our life together. Family for Steve extended to friends and players. Larry and Pat, who are here today, are lifelong friends and family. Shanna is here because she, her father Chet, mother Ann, and Vicky are family. Kyle is here with his mother because they are family. Steve was blessed with many, many wonderful friends and many blessings, and especially thank you to the people who are here today on Zoom. But whenever Steve and I would talk about our life together, we both agreed that having the opportunity to participate in the lives of the Naylor and Ortmayer clans was our biggest blessing. You have all enriched our lives in ways we could never express. You have always grounded us, supported us, loved us, been there for us. Family can break your heart when someone like Erica and Sonia die. Distance from family caused by divorce or geography can be painful. But in the end, family and friends is what saves us and what gives our lives meaning. Thank you all for loving Steve and for loving each other and for being here. And as Tiny Tim said, God bless us one and all.
Into this. Yep. Gotcha. I just want to kind of echo everything my mom said about thanking everyone for being out here. Want to let everybody know how special it's been in the last month or so, hearing about all the different stories and memories, and really looking forward to hearing some more today. I was incredibly lucky with the father that I got, and I'll miss him. But one of the things I think about when I think about him the most is just the example he set in every aspect of his life. How to love, how to accept defeat, how to persevere, whatever it was, his example is what has helped me become the man I am today and will help me be a better man in the future. And with that, I'll let Bo talk a little bit.
Needed a few more minutes, Cody. That was like
You didn't get much.
exclamation point, I'm done. Slam the brakes. But no, thank you everybody for being here. Through this process, I've really, it's been really tough, but my father was, a great dad, great husband. But through this process, we've learned what a mentor he was to so many people, and what he meant. And I've learned so much about him since his passing. He was an egoless man that was very, very, he was always there for everybody, when everybody differently. But I was sitting around thinking this morning and last night, this maybe not quite as organized as you guys may think. And at some point, just pull the microphone out of my hand, because I'm sure if Kevin and Keon are on this call, they're like, oh God, this could take 6 hours, because Bo never shuts up. But I know that a couple of really, really fond memories of my dad that I wanted to share. He being Derby Day, we used to always tease him. We'd always call him for his horse picks on these days, and we knew that we could scratch off a certain number of the horses because he was the master at finding the horse that came in second.
But it had to do with a lot on how he reacted, how
Right.
confident he was that that horse had no chance to win, almost ensured a victory.
Right. So
And
so we got good at it. We figured out, okay, well, hey, let's ask him about this long shot compared to this heavy favorite. And he said, oh, no chance. So then we'd put our money on it and that horse coming first, and so then we'd make money and he'd be sitting over here, cursing and swearing and can you believe that? But so a lot of great horse racing memories, a lot of memories. He had a prized car that I know that my mom absolutely hated, but one of his fondest memories was, going to the beach as a family and driving the car around and, so many memories, but want to hear what you guys have to say, what you guys have to share. Thank you again for being here. Yeah. Anything else?
that's all I got.
All right. Thank you, guys.
I just want to say something really quick. Wait, be sure when you come up to clip it on, because otherwise you go like this, as was just witnessed.
Yeah.
If you want to step back in the doorway, they can see you.
Okay, am I good? Okay, can y'all hear?
Yes.
Okay, I'll talk a little louder. I'm honored to be here because I'm Larry Kennan, and I was a college teammate of Steve Ortmeyer's, and we coached together for years and years and years. And he was a number of things. When he was a sophomore in college and I was a sophomore, he transferred from Vanderbilt to the University of Laverne, and we became teammates and best friends almost immediately. He may not think that, but I thought we became friends almost immediately. And he was a number of things. One, he was a great competitor, whether it was playing poker, shooting pool, betting on the horses, or coaching football. He wanted to win, and he worked hard at doing that. And he was very, very competitive. And he also had a wonderful sense of humor. And the first time I saw that was when I was a sophomore, and he was hurt that year. And so he was all the time telling me at practice that what I should do is I needed to run over some guys instead of dodging them when I had the ball in my hands. And Coach Ortmayer said, no, you want to dodge them and don't let them tackle you. So one day we were playing a bad team, and I ran over near our bench and carrying the football, and there was a tall, skinny looking guy gonna come knock me out of bounds. So I acted like I was stepping out of bounds, and I turned back into him and knocked him right on his back. And Steve used to tell me, you got to roll him. So he was standing right there when I hit the guy, and I said, did I roll him good? He said, yes, sir. And he had that wonderful, deep laugh, like only Steve could have. And he had two ways of expressing himself when he was happy. One was a chuckle that we've all heard many times, and one was that deep, deep laugh that he had when he was really, really happy. And it's been said, the Ortmayer family has been amazing to me. All of you, my life has been totally molded by the Ortmayer family, and I really appreciated being here. Everybody but Bo. So what Steve did in his life was he helped people, many people get jobs, get to feeling better about themselves in coaching, and he was wonderful about that. And I'm still mad. There's two NFL coaches that I won't mention their names, but Steve helped them get jobs when they couldn't get a job. And then when he was in need of a job, he called them and they didn't call him back. And I still have a hard time with my resentment against them. I won't mention their names.
I do too.
Yeah. So anyway, in October, we were back visiting my son in Nashville and Indianapolis. We stopped in Lexington to say hi to Steve and Marilee, and it was really a cool thing. It was very, very touching. We all went to lunch at Steve's favorite hot dog place, and he knew, and Marilee knew, and we all knew you're not supposed to eat like that. But he didn't care. It's that we were going to eat whatever we wanted that day. And I sat next to him. We sat outside. It was a beautiful day. It was like unbelievable, like today is. And he's up there watching us right now. And the look on his face and the gratitude and how good he felt and the smile will forever be etched in my mind. And it was just so good to do that. And when we left, I said to Pat, I said, this might be the last time we see Steve. So we needed to really enjoy it, and we did. And, I just can't say enough about who he was and what he was. And he was he used to tease us all the time, and that was part of his competitiveness, that he wanted to tease you some. And I want to tell a story about, this is kind of Steve. He was a bottom line guy. So when we were just before our senior year in college, we hitchhiked from Bozeman, Montana to Dallas to stay with his folks and be there and spend that summer working out to get in shape for football. And we had ridden up there with Coach Ortmayer, and we'd fished for 2 or 3 days. Now we're hitchhiking, and we're on the road for 32 hours. We're on the Texas-New Mexico border, and we can't get a ride. It's been 6 or 7 hours. I got my Letterman's jacket on, hoping somebody will pick up a Letterman. And finally, this truck driver said, "Look, that my truck's that purple truck out there. You guys go get in the side, duck down a little bit. I'm not supposed to give you a ride, but I will." So I sat in the middle. Steve sat out here. We got in the truck. The guy took off, and he said, "If you see any purple trucks like mine, duck down, because I'm not supposed to be giving you a ride." So Steve pretty soon is snoring a little bit. He's out, and I'm about out. And what I feel this truck driver's hand kind of sliding up my leg, and it's like, what? So and I yawned, and he took his hand away and all that stuff. And so it was kind of weird, And so we pulled over a little bit later, and I said, "Steve, this guy's sliding his hand up my leg, trying to get into my crotch." And he says, "Look, we need a ride." He said, "Just go to sleep, and if you can't sleep, you might enjoy it." So that was dead, right? And the last time I talked to him, and like Marilee said, when he said, "I love you," he meant it from way deep down inside, and it came from way down. And he didn't say it all the time, but when he said it, it was a big deal. And that's what he told me. He said, "I love you, I love you, I love you." And that's all I have. Thank you.
I don't know. Okay, turns out that I was so nervous that I missed a whole page of what I wanted to say. So page 2, I read you page 1 and 3. And so you're not going to get the big sentimental finish, but anyway, page 2 said, he wasn't domestic. He loved his sons, Bo and Cody, and our foster son, Clay. And I wanted to especially read this because I hope you made it on Zoom, Clay. If you're there, know that we're thinking of you today and that we love you. But talking about Steve, staying home and working around the house was anathema to him. His idea of being a father was just to take the boys along to do whatever he was doing anyway. So you learned to keep up in our house or you got left behind. Steve wasn't a great athlete, but mentally he was elite. One of his colleagues told me after he died that he felt Steve was one of the very few people he had met during his 50 years in the NFL who understood coaching and recruiting and being an executive. And Steve was pretty good at all three. And one of the reasons I wanted to read page 2, because a week before he died, he had a visit from, I was talking about Steve being a great competitor. And the week before he died and the day before he had the stroke, 3 of his Kentucky football players came to visit him. And they were sitting around talking. And I mentioned that Steve had been out playing pool and that's how he'd gotten COVID. And one of the players looked at him and said, well, coach, did you win? And Steve looked him in the eyes and said, damn right. And then 6 hours later, he had his stroke and that was kind of the end. But that was Steve on the last good afternoon of his life with his football players. And yes, he played to win. He passed that on to his sons. One Christmas Eve, we were attending midnight mass. They passed the tray with the nuggets of bread and the vials of wine. And I heard Bo looking at Cody and whispering to Cody, I got a bigger piece of bread than you did. And then I looked and Steve was checking over and Steve was trying to decide if he had a bigger piece of bread. Some of Steve's competitive nature was expressed in gambling. A lot of the Ortmeyers seemed to have the sports gambling gene, and he fostered that by creating family betting pools, not just the Derby, but other events. I'm not sure what Steve or his sons or Steve and his brothers and sister or his nieces and nephews would talk about if it hadn't been for sports. So it's really fitting that we're gathered here today to celebrate Steve and the Kentucky Derby at the same time. Steve had a large ego, but he wasn't an egoist. He didn't care about getting credit for things. He cared about getting things done. One of the real comforts for me and Bo and Cody, and they expressed this during the last few weeks, has been hearing from so many people expressing their admiration for Steve and talking about how Steve impacted their life. We heard many things about Steve that he'd done for the very first time, because Steve was very good at keeping his own counsel. Often people said to us, it wasn't just that Steve inspired them, it was that they didn't want to let him down. And so that was and again, nothing Steve cared about more in life than loyalty, friends, and family. So I think now we'll turn it over. Who's going to be the first brave person here and come share a memory of Steve? Come on, you're Nailers and Ortmeyers. We know you're going to talk. Okay, the first one's going to be my sister, Sherilyn, who other than Larry Kennan has known him the longest. Larry's known him the longest, and then I guess of the people here today, and then me, and then Sherilyn. And she's a crier, so we'll see how this goes. Step up in the doorway so people can see. Step up. There you go. Now they can see. Yeah. Well, it's quite an intro. I'm a crier and I'm a nailer, so I'm a talker. So this ought to last a while. The biggest overall thing that I wanted to say about Steve is he just made all of our lives so much richer and exciting. I think probably all of you, as well as me, we rode on his coattails of fame and competition and Super Bowl wins. And it was always so fun to be in my classroom, middle school kids, when they were all Bronco fans. I'm from Denver. And I was a Raider fan when Steve was with the Raiders. And that was like oil and water in Denver. But it was a great connection I had with my kids that was other than just what the subject matter I was trying to teach. So I thank Steve for all those fun, exciting times that I could feel a little special because I was the sister-in-law of a Super Bowl winning coach and administrator. But the story I want to tell about Steve goes all the way back to before he was all of that in a bag of chips. I was a freshman going to Laverne College at that time. And so, you know, what did I know? I was young and probably nervous. And, but I also, my sister was at the same college, so that was comforting. And I met Steve pretty much right away because, you know, he was Marilee's boyfriend. And I knew that, you know, this was my sister's boyfriend. I really had to, you know, be impressive. But I didn't know quite how to do that. So interestingly enough, Steve and I ended up in the same class. I was a freshman, but I had tested out of freshman English. So I was put at the next level, which was Survey of English Literature, which was a sophomore class. Well, Steve, who was a senior, but an English major, which some people find that hard to believe that this jock was an English major, but he was. He had missed that class because his family had moved to Europe for a year, and he went over to Europe for a semester to take advantage of that opportunity. But he couldn't graduate without one semester of Survey of English Lit. So we ended up in the same class, which I kind of thought was a hoot. So he wasn't always in class. It was an 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock class. I was in the morning. And I was, you know, the freshman trying to make an impression, trying to do my best. So I was in class every day without question. And I was taking notes as the professor would speak. And I was making marks in our textbook of what the professor thought might be important. And soon after several weeks, we come up on our first test. Okay, I'm in the dorm, I'm studying, the test's gonna be the next day, and I've got my notes in front of me in my book, and I'm studying, and I get buzzed. So someone's come to visit me. So I went out and there was Steve. Well, okay, hi, Steve. He says, test is tomorrow in English Lit, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I need your notes and I need your book. He hadn't been in class half the time, so he didn't have those notes. So being the dumb freshman that I was and really looking up to my big, you know, boyfriend, sister's boyfriend, who was a senior, I just fell right in line. I just handed him over everything, and I didn't finish studying, but that's okay because, you know, Steve wanted my notes. So we show up for the test, and sure enough, he got an A on the test off of my notes. But he was so smart that he could be in class half the time and pick up everything anyway. And I got a B on the test. So what did that teach me? Well, you would have thought that would have taught me to stick up for myself and be a stronger individual. And the next time he would come and do that, I would say, are you kidding, Steve? You know, you have to take your own notes and be your own person and pass your own test. And I'm going to use my notes. Well, it didn't teach me that. It just taught me to study 3 days ahead of time. But actually, this isn't a story about dissing Steve, because actually deep down, what it really taught me was that he thought I could do it. And that he relied on me, which was totally amazing to a freshman with a senior that I really looked up to. So he did for me what he did for so many people and made me feel like I really had something that was valuable. Love you, Steve.
Just hold it where,
Just hold it. The microphone's right here.
oh,
And so if you just step backwards.
Up in the doorway.
up in the doorway. I'm Mark, Steve's third brother. And on behalf of the other siblings here, I'm here to say that Stephen was the quintessential firstborn. And I can guarantee you that Annie and Roger know exactly what I'm talking about. But so do Bo and Cody, because he married the quintessential firstborn. Now, I'm 6 years younger than Stephen. And so I got to know him from the perspective of looking up, usually from the ground, when we were playing football in the backyard in Nashville. And they designated me the center, which, you know, was typical of Stephen. The other fun was when we played baseball. These guys had dug out this beautiful diamond clover infield out in the property. But out in the country, it's always tough to find people to play. So they were begrudging, but they decided I could play with them, but I was first base. Now, that's not a slip of the tongue, okay? I was first base. They'd stand me over there on first base. They gave me this little glove that had no strings between the fingers. And the local rule was if they could hit me with the ball before the runner got there, the runner was out. They had to get buy-in from everybody on that. But when you're the little brother, you're always looking to play with your big brothers until you get old enough to figure out, you know, this is the worst. And it took a while. I probably didn't figure that out until I was 16 or 17. Slow child. But, you know, playing with my brothers, playing with their deal. And Steve really was the ringleader, of course. He was the oldest. He was always the guy who invented the game of basketball, where if you could shove the other guy through the drywall, his basket didn't count, you know, things like that. So you know, Steve was that way for me all of my life. And until, like I said, I did finally catch on a little bit. Steve, of course, I think will never forget the day that he and I went to return bottles. We'd been in Dallas for about a week. We're taking bottles up to the 7-Eleven. We come to a boulevard with a median. He goes out there and he yells, "No, Mark." I thought he said, "Go, Mark." Pedal, 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 looking at the car that's bearing down on me here. Got hit by the car over here. Steve always said it's the closest he ever saw anybody come to getting killed. So, but I didn't lean on that the way I should have. I should have played that out much better, and I just never did. Again, it was to the head. But Steve, I think my fondest memory of Stephen as a coach, of which there were many, was going down to Tampa to the second Super Bowl, staying with Steve the whole week. And I remember on about Wednesday, Steve's looking at all of his special teams film, getting ready for the Redskins. And he's sitting there and I'm watching, and yeah, it doesn't mean all that much to me, but he's running this back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And finally he goes, I won't say it, an expletive. He said, "We are going to block an effing punt this week." And of course they did. That game was over like 2 minutes into the game. As soon as Lester Hayes blocked that punt and fell on it and so forth. The Skins were done. And that was pretty remarkable. I thought calling his shot, his Babe Ruth shot. But I could easily go on and on about Steve, and I will at other times and later tonight and so forth. But you know, my big bro, miss him terribly. But in many senses, I don't. You know, he's still absolutely with me, and he always will be. Thanks. Easy to follow that outfit.
Best thing I could do is follow that outfit. I can't dress that way.
When you're up there so people can see it.
Hold on to this, and if you step up onto the floor.
Step back here.
Good.
Yeah, I'm Roger Ortmayer, the number 3 son. And of course, there's 1,000 stories you could tell, but one that popped to mind, and I'm thanking Marilee for this, is I'm like 8 years old, and I wanted to play Little League, or knothole they called it. Steve was the pitcher. He's 3 years older, and had quite the arm, but wasn't sure where the ball was going to go. And no one at the tryouts would catch it. So he came to me and he said, what position you want to play? I said, oh, second base. He says, you're going to have to catch me because no one else will. And I became the first member of the team, and I caught Steve for a couple of years, and it taught me how to be tough. I got hit and hurt. And he kept throwing that ball, and yeah, it taught me how to put up with pain. But you know, you listen to your older brother. He said, if you want to play on this team, you're going to have to be the catcher. So he was telling me what to do then, and for most of my life. So that was just a quick story, and there's a lot of them I could tell, but I'll pass it on. Yeah.
You can stay here, you know. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm the younger sister, so Annie. I don't have that much to remember. I've been told lots of stories about growing up with my older brothers. I remember Steve as I became more of an adult. And one of my favorite things was, you know, he was always so positive. If you can get what you want if you work hard enough and set yourself up to be in the right place at the right time. He Marilee let me come down and spend a summer with them, and I got to work at the racetrack in Bay Meadows. And I just remember my brother thinking, so I'm not in vet school yet, but I'm going to get there. I can remember my older brother thinking, I'm in now, because if you're on the backstretch, you got all the knowledge. So he's always going, what'd you find out today? What do you know? How's this horse doing? And I said, Stephen, do you see veterinarians still working at the track after they've been there for a long, do you see all these trainers still working at the track? There's a reason they have to still work. No one knows what a horse is going to do. No matter how much information you think you have, no matter what you think is going on, nobody knows who's going to cross that line first. But again, he gave me the confidence that I was going to get into vet school. And the story that I don't tell too often is the fact that when I applied to vet school, I got rejected by Colorado State. I got the letter from Colorado State, wait list at Washington State. And I called Steve. He says, no problem. You just wait. They're going to come through. It wasn't a week later, I got a letter that said, hey, welcome to Colorado State. And it was like, did Steve do something? I don't think Steve did anything. He never said, I don't know. But anyway, I was fortunate to get in at Colorado State, become a veterinarian. Great. He wished I had stayed with the ponies. I did dogs and cats. He was an amazing older brother for support, for confidence, and just for love.
You don't need to speak into that.
Hi, so my name is Ilana Naylor. We have mom and dad had 4 daughters. I'm the last of the 4. And I have, is that okay, James? You're Marilee's sister. I am Marilee, I'm sorry. I am Marilee's sister. And each one of you would have a dozen stories to tell, but I have one that has meant something to me over the years. And that is Marilee and Steve were set to get married. And my family flew from New Jersey to California. And I've heard several people here say that they wanted to rise to the occasion with Steve. So they took us to Disneyland. And I really wanted to impress him. I was the youngest sister. So he said, come on, Ilana, let's ride the roller coaster. And I said, okay, get there. And he sits in the front seat. He has some size to him. So his knees are at the bar. He's secure. I wasn't much heavier than I was now. And I am holding on for dear life and I am flying in the air. And he's raising up his hands with a rebel yell. All of you know what that would be. And he was having the time of his life. And I come off of that roller coaster. And I had a bruise the size of a grapefruit on my arm for having tried to hold on. And I have never ridden another roller coaster ride. And I'm going to go to the bathroom and come back. So just so you know, I'm not disappearing.
Okay. I'm worried about where I'm standing. Thank you. I apologize. I don't have anything really prepared. So I need to just tell you from my heart, if I may. And it may come out like a big bubble snot cry, so I apologize.
Tell everybody who you are.
I will. So I'm Corlin Ortmayer Harrison. My parents are Ort and Corny, or Rolland and Cornelia Ortmayer. My dad coached football at University of Laverne, first at Laverne College, and Larry Kinnan and Steve Ortmayer were a pair of football players that my sister Susie and I loved to watch. It was a big deal at our house. Steve lived with us while he was at Laverne College. And you would have thought that my parents were his natural parents, and the pride that they took in who he was, always. My mother was concerned that he mowed down our tomato plants one summer, but that was really, it was okay. So Steve was a big deal in our house. When he introduced us to Marilee, she became a big deal in our house. Still is a big deal in our house. Give me a second. Sorry. So I grew up admiring Steve, who was considerably older than me. And I'm just going to tell you two things. One, 10-year-old me going to the football banquet at Laverne College, Steve's senior year. Now, nowadays, they aren't necessarily a big deal. Big deal back then, and always a big deal in my house. I got a new dress, a new outfit to wear to this banquet. And I had overheard Steve say that his favorite color was yellow. And so I got a yellow dress. And this big college kid made a special effort to tell his bratty little 10-year-old cousin how much he loved my yellow dress and how nice I looked, and made me feel like I was winning the trophy that night. And I'll never forget it. And I'm quite a bit older now. And I have one more story I'd like to share. Of course, so many, all of us have many, many stories. Steve was the guy in our family because he was first born to all the Ortmeyers. So Grandma and Grandpa Ortmayer, Roger was his daddy. He was firstborn. So he stepped into the light for a lot of us when people needed to speak on behalf of the Ortmayer family. Spoke at both of my parents' memorials and continued to help us find a way to be okay. So years later, I'm finally blessed with a beautiful daughter who decides to go to Laverne. And that was a hard decision, hard to be an Ortmayer. Even though her last name is Harrison, it's pretty clear she's an Ortmayer. Hard to be an Ortmayer at Laverne sometimes. I didn't realize she was struggling quite so much. She reached out to Steve. I'm so grateful. My cousin kept my daughter in school. She's a brilliant athletic trainer. He told her she would be so long before she knew she would be. Supported her quietly, just the two of them. So, as a cousin, loved him. As the mother of a daughter who he supported in that beautiful, you can do this, they'd be lucky to have you kind of way. Oh, I can't even tell you how wonderful that makes me feel. So, Steve, if I didn't tell you, I'm telling you now. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Larkin. I'm Sherilyn's oldest spouse. So, and I'm your Zoom host today. Oldest son-in-law, oldest child's spouse. Yes, Steve's nephew. Thank you.
I'm
pretty sure
I heard
They're making fun of me. So I'm here to ask, does anyone on Zoom want to share a story? If you do, please unmute yourself
And raise your hand.
and raise your hand on Zoom. There's a little icon. And I'm going to step behind the computer and then I'll project you on the screen. And we have a speaker so we can hear you. Frank, can you give me just 1 second?
Oh, that's Frank Monroe. Okay.
All right.
Let's start with
Frank and Laura.
Can they hear me if I stand up here or not? Can people hear me if I stand here? Okay. Well, while we're working on the technology, the person you're seeing on the screen now, because we have a monitor so we can see the Zoom people, you're seeing one of Steve's high school friends, Frank, and his wife, Laura Monroe. And we're working on getting them. So Frank, if you can hear me, you're going to be up next. Okay. Technology is wonderful when it works. So just a minute. Nice to see everybody. Do what? Okay, can you say something, Frank?
Yes, I can say,
Okay, we can hear you very, very clearly. So go ahead and say whatever you would like to say. Frank has known Steve since what, 8th grade?
I was trying to remember 7th or 8th. I can't remember that far back, but I think it's the 8th grade. Steve and I went to, well, we played baseball and basketball together in high school. We went to Vanderbilt together with Randy Weezer, who was on a football scholarship, and Steve's roommate at Vanderbilt. And we had just such wonderful times together. The couple of stories that I think tell me and maybe will help tell you who Steve was as a man and as a person, and that little ingenious little guy that lived inside of him. We went to, of course, as freshmen, we had Western Civilization, and all the freshman class went to the same course. So we're in a huge auditorium. And Steve and a guy named Don Owens, who was a friend of ours, would sit on the back row. Steve would diagram an offensive football play. Don would diagram a defensive formation, and then they'd argue about which one won. And then they'd change, do it backwards, and Don would do the offense and Steve would do the defense. And of course, you'd think that Steve would not have fared very well in the course, but of course he aced it, not having listened to a word the guy said. The other thing about Steve that was amazing was his memory. You didn't want to play cards with Steve because he remembered every card that was played, no matter what the game you were playing. You didn't want to play, you only played bridge if he was your partner. If he wasn't your partner, by the time you got to where you had 4 cards left in your hand, he knew exactly what they were. Don't know how he did stuff like that, but it was for him just easy. He'd write his essays for advanced English by just sitting at the desk and starting to write in ink, never making a mistake, never having to cross anything out, never having to rewrite anything, and he'd make an A. He was an amazing, amazing intellect. We had wonderful times in high school with our buddies Mike Bassett and Bud Story. Sorry. The last October a year ago, he came down to Galveston. We have a house in Galveston, and Bud and Mike and Steve and I got together, we couldn't play golf anymore because we all got too old. We used to get together and play golf on occasion. And he came down. He forgot to tell us that he was on dialysis and that he came against his doctor's orders because he was going to be off dialysis for a few days. But that's just the kind of guy he was. He gave to everybody, and we loved him for it. And we really miss him. And we give our condolences to all the Ortmeyers and Naylors, because you know better than the rest of us what a big void he leaves. But we know he's up there working Jesus on our behalf. So that's good to know. And thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, Frank. Laura, nice to see you in person. I
Thank
guess
you,
I'm
Mary.
not in front of the camera. Thank you, Frank, and nice to see you. Okay, next person. Do you have another person on Zoom? Okay. Okay, probably Karen Brooks, but we'll find out. Okay, Rich and Karen Brooks.
Hi, Marilee. Can you
Hi,
hear
Rich.
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Just wonderful hearing all the great stories about Steve. Karen and I have a lot of memories. Of course, I've known Steve for a lot of years, even before we got together in St. Louis. And those were interesting times. Steve took a team from Los Angeles to St. Louis, got us a temporary practice facility at Matthews Dickey Boys Club, and then we built a new facility and moved into that, and just a lot of great times in St. Louis. And unfortunately, I didn't do a good enough job coaching, and I got canned after 2 years. But after a few years with Dan Reeves, and then a couple of years out of coaching, I ended up at Kentucky, and Steve was one of the very first guys I called to come as assistant head coach, special teams, and tight end coach. And it's one of the best things I did. And it was a struggle, as Marilee and Bo and Cody can remember, those first few years, because we didn't have a lot of scholarship players because they were on probation when we went there. But through Steve's diligence and his commitment in recruiting and organizational skills and great special teams plays, as well as developing some outstanding tight ends, one being Jacob Tammy, who played in the NFL for a lot of years. We just had a great time turning that thing around, and I'll just never forget Steve's contributions in every way. And all the stories I've heard about how smart he is, there isn't any question. He had a memory that I haven't been around many guys other than my old college coach, Tommy Prothro, who had a memory like that. And certainly Steve will be remembered by so many players through his career. But I think he has a special place in a lot of players from the University of Kentucky. Karen, you want to say anything?
Marilee, we just love him so much, and we love you, and we're thinking about your family and your boys. The best to you.
Thank you. Love you both.
Marilee, can you hear me?
Carolyn, yes, that's probably Carolyn Ortmayer. So we need to get them on. Carolyn Lou.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Lou, we're working on it. Yes, now we can hear you. Go ahead and talk.
right.
This is Steve's brother, Lou, brother number 2, and he's in North Carolina today. So go ahead, Lou. We can hear you and we can see you.
Yeah, I was the number 2 brother. I'm a former college professor, retired. My immediate stories for Steve were my athletic experiences, which always included him, or maybe he included me, like Mark said. And prominent among those stories were that growing up in grade school, he was always the team leader. Partly that was because of his personality, but it was also the fact that he was by far the biggest kid in the school, always as a grade school player. We played basketball, baseball, and football together. A couple of stories about that. Steve was the basketball center and star. We fared pretty well when he managed to stay in the game. His forte was fouling the other team. He not infrequently fouled out in the first half. 5 charging fouls in the first half. He always went the direct line to the basket rather than sort of finessing a little bit more. One kid from another school finally asked me, why does he keep doing this? And I said, well, you ought to learn from it. The best thing to do is just get out of his way. That's what we do. In football, he was the quarterback or tailback to throw the ball. He either ran it or he threw it. So I quickly developed the instinct to become a wide receiver because that was the only way I was going to get the ball. And I was the chief receiver, which worked well. In baseball, I played first base because, as Roger explained earlier, Steve recruited him to catch because nobody else would. The only place to be besides that was first base because Steve threw the ball so hard that nobody ever hit it. They either struck out or got hit and therefore got to first base. So it was a quick survey to figure out where the action was. So that was basically Steve. He sort of took charge, but not in all things. He wanted me to become an architect. It didn't happen. He wanted Annie to become a veterinarian focusing on racehorses. She ran her own clinic, mostly of small animals. So he didn't always get his way, but he was pretty persuasive. I'll probably stop at that.
Okay, I guess I'm live again. The next person is going to be Berta James. Okay, Berta, I'll go ahead and introduce you while he's hooking you up. Berta is Steve's first cousin. What? Oh, yes, they want me to say thank you to Lou. So we're thanking Lou and we're waiting for Berta to come. Berta and Money. Money has since passed, but Berta and Money are first cousins to all these Ortmeyers. And I believe she's, hi, Berta, I think you're coming from Texas. So
Yep.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead and talk.
Okay, thank you. Well, my tribute is a little bit to all the Ortmeyers and then of course, specifically to Steve, but I grew up as a little girl with my sister in little old Ashland, Illinois. It was Berta and Money Lohman, and we were the cousins of the Ortmeyers, and it was always a thrill when they came to town because we were 2 little girls that were raised in a pretty controlled environment, and the Ortmeyers would come and there was nothing controlled about anything that they did. It was like wild children running all over the place. It was awesome. We just loved it. We loved having the Ortmeyers come to town. So to back up just briefly, Steve's mom was my dad's sister. And so that's the connection. My Steve's mom was born and raised in this little town of Ashland, Illinois. And so we would visit them in their house in Nashville or in Dallas, and they would come and visit us in Ashland. And we just thought, my sister and I thought they hung the moon because they could get away with murder, and my sister and I couldn't get away with anything. So we kind of idolized all these crazy boys that would come to town. And I think one time they showed up with a litter of kittens. I mean, it was just these crazy things they would do. And I remember when little Annie came along, how excited we were because finally there was a little girl that, you know, could be, was younger than me, and we could take it, but the boys picked on her all the time. And so we were always trying to protect her because, you know, they were in a rough and tumble kind of house, but crazy times when they would come to Ashland. And I'd seem to follow the Ortmeyers around kind of wherever I go. We went to Dallas for Roger's wedding in 1968, and Steve and Marilee and Lou and Carolyn had just gotten married, and everybody was there. And well, it was a great time for one we all had, but in the end, Steve's like saying to me, well, where are you going to college? And I said, I don't know yet. And he said, well, what about SMU? Well, by golly, I ended up going to SMU. So, and my Uncle Roger, Steve's dad, had been a professor there. So there's that connection. And then of course, what do? Is I marry the only Montana guy in the school and move to Montana. So then there's another Ortmayer connection, but on the other side. And I finally remember one time where my family in Montana met the Ortmayer clan, and Steve was always the leader of the group, but we met him on the Yellowstone River in Montana. They'd been on a big long rafting trip with Ort and his whole family, and it was just a wonderful time. But speaking of Montana, you know, my kids were raised there, and so they were very proud of their cousin Steve because they could watch him on TV. And if you lived in Montana in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it's pretty isolating before the internet. So when they could see their big cousin Steve on TV, and Rich, I've never met you, but I do remember you specifically because I was always rooting for the Rams, and you were always kind of I was one of your little groupies, and you didn't even know I existed. But anyway, my kids grew to idolize Steve because first of all, he was on TV, and secondly, he had something to do with sports. And my son was known to say that when he bragged about knowing Steve, and he said every little kid at his grade school knew what special teams were and what they did, and that his cousin was, you know, the leader of the special teams for the Raiders and the Rams, and so it was always a big point of conversation. But I didn't really realize until Steve had passed how important he was to my son's youth. My son would say, Steve was like a hero to me. And here I'm his mom, and I was always so surprised because I just thought, well, he's my cousin, but then to wind things up, my dad, as I said, was Steve's mom's brother. And they had, and Steve inherited a lot of his mom's mannerisms, which means that he had a lot of my dad's mannerisms and my grandmother's. They all had certain ways that they smiled and what they said and how they said things. And my dad had two little girls. He didn't have any boys to raise. And so Steve became, of all of the nieces and nephews, Steve became like his son. And my parents lived in Springfield, Illinois, and they went down to the Rams games all the time. And Steve and Marilee would host them for Raiders games. They went to, I don't know how many Super Bowls, and Steve just took care of my mom and dad like they were his parents. And my dad he was so proud of Steve, but he'd always just say, Steve's like the son I never had. So I think that's the biggest compliment you could give somebody. Love you, Marilee, and hello to Mark and Annie and Roger, and of course, Lou at a distance. So good to see all of you.
Okay, thank you, Berta. All right, we're kind of getting to last call here. Flores, okay. James just told me, and while I'm waiting here for him to get Tom Flores on the line, big thank you to James. My nephew, James Larkin, is the one that has handled all this. So I want to hear a big round of applause because I can use my cell phone and my laptop, but no way could I do any of this. And James has been our tech guy, and thank you, James. Okay, Tom and Barbara, I can see you.
We're here.
Okay, it's your turn. Go for it.
All right, you got it.
Tom, before you say anything, I don't think Roger pointed it out. We've had a lot of Raider stuff here today, but Roger, come back up here a minute. Roger, who has some gray in his hair, spent his morning in his hotel room dyeing his hair silver and black. So camera here.
There you go.
So I don't know if you can see his. Can you see he has so we're all rated. Okay, Tom and Barbara, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Roger. I remember Roger always called Roger when we needed rooms up at Harris or gambling someplace. Great times, great times. Yeah. Anyway, Steve Ortmayer, what a legend! What great memories I have. I first met Steve when I was an assistant coach with the Raiders. I just started my assistant coach career, and I was visiting Colorado, University of Colorado, and he was coaching there. And I didn't know it at the time. I think Larry Kenny was also there. I think Chet Franklin was also there at the time. They all ended up working together. But I was there and Steve was never, he would never slow down because the coach there, the head coach, always had him doing multiple things. And that's the kind of guy he was. There wasn't enough sometimes for him to do, so he always took on another challenge. But he was a friend, he was a colleague, he was a good guy, and he was my go-to guy, because if I ever had something that needed to be done, Steve was the guy. He always had my back. And he and I were always the last two guys to leave the building, maybe Sam Bogosian too, to leave the building on weeknights after work. He was just endless. I don't know how he found the time to do it all, because I was a head coach and I couldn't find all the time needed. But he was, when I look at back and he and Larry and Rich Brooks, those are a name that I admired. He was always, Rich did it. You did him a favor, Rich, because there's a few things. Steve loved football. So he was in football all of his life, but he loved his family. But he also loved the ponies. And you brought him back to Kentucky where he belonged. So he could bet on the ponies. Our first time in moving to Los Angeles, we moved down from training camp and I couldn't find my special teams coach. We were trying to have a meeting. And it just so happened I found out that Hollywood Park was opening that day. And where was my special teams coach? He was at Hollywood Park, for crying out loud. Jesus Christ. I just looked at him when he came in. He came in and tried to hide. How the hell is the guy, the biggest Steve Ortmayer, going to hide in a room for crazy? I thought to myself, did you win? I don't know if he won or not, but he loved the ponies as well. I was probably the only head coach ever to have two guys on his staff from Laverne College. I didn't even know where Laverne College was, but he and Larry we worked together a long time. We had a lot of success. Like I said, he always had my back. And when I heard one of the relatives loved it to see the games because he was on TV. And if you look closely, he was on TV because he was always on the official's ass, and I was always grabbing him and pulling him off the field. I couldn't get him off the field. See him at Sam Bogosian. I had one in one hand and one in the other, pulling him. And Steve was competitive. He was competitive. I was not the kind of guy to yell at officials. I had plenty of coaches who would do it for me. But we had a great time together. We had a great career together. And most of all, we had a friendship that lasted forever. And I miss you, Steve. I do.
You know, he loved you. And like I said, life is about memories, and we all have great, great memories. So thank you for making time today, and hope to see you in August. Okay, anybody else on Zoom that we need to do, or we'll have to wrap this up at some point because we got to get ready for the Derby. Okay, all right. So is there anybody else here? Okay, Maurice and Lisa, come on up, take the microphone. And Ben, okay. We got time for whatever people need to do. Oh, no, I can get it off. I can't get it on somehow. There, I mean, I'm finally figuring it out. There you go. Give me up. Nope, there we go.
Marilee is like on this. There we go. And in, right? Sorry, trip over the cord. Am I good? I'm Lisa Ortmayer. I'm Mark Ortmeyer's wife. And I don't know, I feel like I'm one of the last in-laws to join the Ortmayer clan. Mark being 6 years younger than Steve, and then me coming into the family after the family had been set for years. Some of the kids had started to be born already, and I couldn't have been welcomed more warmly. We were laughing about it just the other day, landing at Bozeman Airport, which was when Mark decided he would bring me to meet the family. The entire family, and if you know Ortmeyers, they do not like leave home to go to the airport to greet people. The entire Ortmayer family were there. Corny, help! And Ort was there, and Steve was there, and I'm a little overwhelmed. And Steve just came up to me and he put his arm around me and he said, "We are just so glad to have you here and be part of our family. Don't worry about any of this." And I was just like, I'm like, okay, that sounds great. But everybody talked about Steve and family, and I just have to pause for a minute, because Steve raised two young men who are remarkable in their own right in so many ways, and they just embody everything that Steve had to give to the world. And his impact on them and this next generation coming up, my two kids, Abby and Tori, maybe you'll hear from them at some point. I don't have words. I don't have words. It's what you said. He lived his values and he imbued them. One of my favorite stories is we went to St. Louis. Abby was, I have no idea, and Tori even younger. We were in elementary school. You had just moved there. We were all there to go to probably a game. It must have been Thanksgiving. I don't even know. And Bo was in high school and Cody was in middle school. And they stayed home the entire weekend. They had their friends over down in the basement, but family was coming into town and they were going to stay home. And I kept waiting for these, kids to go out with their friends. And they spent the entire weekend entertaining my elementary school kids, who were pretty sure that Bo and Cody were there to take care of them. And they always felt that included. And it was because Steve felt, I'm certain of it, and Marilee, that family is what comes first. When your family is there, you're always there for them. And Steve has been there for every one of us at different points in your life. And he was always there when you needed him. Abby ended up at University of Kentucky, no surprise, because Steve, of course, sold it hard. And she wanted to go swim at a D1 school. And Steve, of course, couldn't imagine anywhere else she should go. And turns out neither could she. Tori, I'm convinced, is a professional coach today because of growing up with Steve and under Steve's tutelage. And the other really amazing memory that has carried me forever is I remember after, who knows, it was definitely a Tennessee game, and it was definitely after the press conference, and we had lost again, and it was Thanksgiving and it was cold. And we were devastated. Who knows how many overtimes there were, missed field goals and opportunities. And Steve just looked at me and I said, I'm sorry, it was such a tough loss. He goes, no, we just didn't coach him right. Like, it's on the coaches. We didn't do right by those kids. And Steve owned every single thing that he did, and he felt responsible. But that lesson and what he said to me has carried me forever, which is, you know, you own what you do and you own your impact that you have on the world and on those people around you. And when it doesn't go your way, you know, you just have to step up and own that too. And then you pick up the pieces and you keep going on and you do right the next time. But I could not be prouder to be part of this family. I can't imagine a better family to be with. And God knows I miss your dad every single day. And Steve has been just so larger than life for all of us. But as we say, I'm Jewish, and our faith, may his memory be a blessing. He will live forever because he is living with all of us forever. And we will tell his story to our children and their children. And that's what you're hoping for when you enter the world, and that's what you hope when you leave. So love you, Steve.
Tamarillo. Okay, I guess we're going to talk to Lou and Augie Tamarillo.
That's right.
Okay, hi Augie.
Marilee, how are you?
We're having a wonderful day. I've told several people here when Steve was dying, and he knew he was dying, and those last couple weeks, and he would go to bed at night and he would look at me and he'd say, today was a wonderful day. And I would say, yes, it was. And it was because of so many of family and friends checking in. So anyway, nice to see you. Sorry it's for today, but nice to see you.
Oh, you're the best, Marilee. To pull this off. I mean, I knew this was going to be special because you've been such a special lady in his life. And to do this is remarkable. It's just remarkable. I want to go back to 1968, 69. I joined the University of Colorado. I was coaching at William and Mary, and Steve was an assistant there at that time. And I just noted how introspective he was and how he could concentrate when we have meetings. And he always seemed to see things behind the words. He understood things better than a lot of us. And it wasn't a very emotional guy. He's very, very calm and very creative. And I'm going to allude to a creativeness that he had, two issues that I had dealing with him. We were getting ready to play the University of Kansas in Boulder, and I was coaching the offensive line, and Steve was helping us. And as we were getting ready for the week, and they had a terrific team at that time. Pepper Rogers was the head football coach. John Riggins was the running back who ended up being a great player for Washington Redskins. And then they had Bobby Douglas, a left-handed quarterback, and ended up playing for the Chicago Bears. They had a really good football team, and they were having a great year. And we were just starting to turn the program around at Colorado. But anyway, Steve walks into our office and he says, I got this article from the Kansas City newspaper, and Pepper is really making fun of us and really acting like they're not even going to worry about playing us, that they have an excellent football team. And it was a very derogatory article. And I said, well, heck, let's put it up on the bulletin board. So we made a big deal out of Pepper Rogers, thinking we weren't very damn good. And they came to Boulder. We won the game. And when the game was over, Pepper Rogers was leaving the team house, as we called it. And he walked into our locker room and he saw the article on the newspaper about the newspaper. It was on the bulletin board. And he said, I never said that. I never said that. Now I know what happened. That damn Ortmayer, being an English major, wrote that article, went downtown Boulder and created a newspaper. We put it on the bulletin board, got our team all jacked up and beat Kansas. Steve Ortmayer and his creativity. I mean, that's the kind of guy. He was so competitive, and he took a risk by doing that. And we bought it. We thought it was a newspaper article from the Kansas City newspaper. And he came out after and we said, that damn Ortmayer, you know. And the other thing, I'll let Lou say something quickly here, but Ortmayer was a great recruiter. He was doing some of the best players on our football team were Steve Ortmeyer's prospects. Well, I get a call from him because I also buy the equipment. And he says, Coach, he says, can you get me a pair of gold track shoes? I said, Ort, what do you want a pair of gold track? Well, he said, I'm recruiting this guy who's a track player, but he's going to end up being a football player for us. So I had to go find out, where do you find gold track shoes? But I managed to do that. And the shoes are for a guy named Cliff Branch, who ended up being an All-American, played great for the Raiders, and just passed away last spring. I'm thinking, well, those two are together now. But he was just a great guy, and he helped me understand poise and pressure. We became great friends, and he's just a terrific human being. You all have alluded to that, but we as not his immediate family, but we are part of his family. We loved him, and merrily, those Colorado days were great days, and it was because Ort was such a great recruiter and helped us win many games and become a national power, because Steve was recruiting the kind of players it takes to get that. Lou has one story, then we'll let you all go.
Yes, Marilee, you alluded to it earlier that Steve was not really that domesticated. This is engraved in my mind. You invited Augie and I for dinner on a Friday night in the off season for tacos. That was your specialty. You were a young bride and learned that skill you told us at cooking. So anyway, we came over at the designated time, and the idea was that Steve was going to join us. So we waited and we waited and we waited. And I'm telling you, it seemed like a couple of hours went by and you finally said, well, let's just go ahead and eat. So we did. And Augie and I went home. Steve still had not shown up. I called you the next day. He still had not showed up. I called you on Sunday. He still had not shown up. And on Monday morning, you called the University of Colorado secretary of the athletic department to try to find out where your husband was. It turned out he was where, Augie, in New Mexico?
Yeah, he was going after a football player.
He was going after a football player, and he absolutely, totally forgot the dinner, the wife, the friends. He got on a plane on Friday, didn't tell anybody anything, forgot the phone call. So I want to give you a shout out, Marilee. You were the woman for him. I don't know how many gals would have been able to just take it in stride. That's what you did your whole life. You wrote me a letter last week and said he was a wonderful man, and I hope you got my letter back. And I said, and you were a wonderful woman.
Amen. Thank you. Love you all. Any coach's wife has put up with a lot, not just me. We can all tell coach's wives stories. Okay, anybody? Okay, anybody? Yeah, Marisa wants to talk here. I think we're getting close to the end because, like I said, we've got to. Steve would not want us to miss the Derby. No. Hold this. Oh, I was gonna put it on. Yeah, we have to get on the mint juleps and the Derby and.
I just want to,
Step up back here. See, I am the firstborn and I'm bossy. You have to step up here. Oh, I thought, nope. That camera needs to be able to see you.
I can say you can move it, but okay. I'll just add to Steve's domesticated side. Oh, I'm Marisa Naylor. I am daughter number 3 in the Naylor family. And so I was Steve's sister-in-law. And I remember one time where my youngest sister and I flew out to California. We all lived in New Jersey at the time. And Steve and Mary were getting married. And so we flew out and we were going to stay with Mary for just a couple days before because we thought we were kind of hot stuff doing without mom and dad. And we were kind of young. And so we were staying in Marilee's apartment, and she had this little tiny apartment in Laverne, and she was still working up until their wedding. And so we were in the apartment, and Steve came by one afternoon to sort of check on us. And so we were there and we were talking. We had this pretty interesting conversation about history. And so it got kind of in depth, and he was really knowledgeable and really smart. And so, we enjoyed the conversation. And then he offered us something to drink, and we said, okay, lemonade.
And so he says, okay, well, I'll go get you lemonade. And he went into this little kitchen and we kind of stayed in the sitting room. And it took an awfully long time to get this lemonade. So eventually my sister and I went into the kitchen, and Steve was standing at the kitchen counter with a frozen can of lemonade laying sideways with a knife, cutting that can open with a knife. He did not know how to use a can opener. And that was when I first learned the concept of not wanting to learn to do something, because this was a really intelligent guy and he did not want to know how to work in the kitchen. And I've never thought of that concept before. And so Steve taught us that there are things you might not want to learn. And so that has stayed with me, that image of this wonderful human being standing at the counter sawing this can, because there's more than one way to do something. So we love you, Steve. We remember you, and always.
Okay, WJ is going to be next. WJ is one of my wonderful brother-in-laws. And WJ is getting the award for the best shirt of the day.
My name's-
You have to back up so people on Zoom can see it. All right.
My name's WJ and I hang out with my wife, Sherilyn. Those of you that were here yesterday, hopefully you had the spirit of Steve somewhere in your conversations, because for our experience, there isn't a barbecue place anywhere in the country that Steve didn't want to go to. And so I'm sure he was here yesterday for the barbecue. The way that we got a hold of Steve was my wife and I are both middle school educators. And every time the Broncos played the Raiders would come to town. We don't know how it happened, but Steve was able to sneak out from Al Davis, from the hotels, because he wanted to go to his favorite barbecue place down in Denver. And we did that repeatedly because we just wanted to be with him to find out what was going on and what have you. Well, one time that he came, he got out of Al Davis at the hotel, and he came to our school. And Sherilyn and I had about 200 kids, and they were all up in a library. And Steve was giving his, you got to stay in school and you got to do your best and don't let anything stop you. And if you're really good at it, you'll make it and all that. And towards the end, the word of Super Bowl came up. Well, Steve held up his hand. And most of you know the Super Bowl rings are gigantic. And so he starts talking about the Super Bowl and how they got there and so forth. And he actually had one of his players come with him to do the stay in school speech and so forth. Towards the end, one of the kids in the front row there said, "Can we see it?" Well, Steve held up his hand, took off a ring, I'm guessing $25,000 worth or something. And I was in the front of the library and Sherilyn was in the back. And as soon as he handed it to one of the students, Sherilyn and I were in front of the doors. There was no way in the world that nobody was getting out of there until we got that ring back. She says, "Don't worry about it." $25,000 worth of whatever. So Sherilyn and I grabbed the doors, and we had to stay there at the doors until Steve got it, but they passed it all the way around, and every kid in there was able to take a look at it and feel it and so forth. But that's the way Steve was. Luckily for us, the ring came back. Luckily for the Raiders, Steve was able to go back to the hotel that day sporting his ring. So that's that's our experience with Steve.
Thank you. Okay, okay. Come on. Anybody else here? We're getting towards the end. Okay, Tori is going to speak and then we're going to go Stella. Okay. Hold this. Okay. Stand up there.
All right, as many of you know, I'm Tori, so I'm a nephew, the next generation. One quick story that I thought was worthwhile that I thought I really enjoyed was coming down the stretch a few months ago. We all flew out to Lexington when we knew that time was kind of getting short, and you know, we all wanted to be around and hang out. And I think everybody was a little cautious, not sure exactly like what the situation was going to be, how Steve was going to be, what his energy was going to be like. And we're sitting there, and they're I don't know, like our folks are getting ready to go out and pick up some groceries and figure out what we're doing for food for the day. And they say, all right, we're going to Costco. Steve, do you need anything? And he looks up and says, hot dog. And I thought that the way that he kind of went out there at the end, calling his shots, you know, a commercial would come on TV and he's like, I don't think I've ever had stuffed crust cheese pizza before. You know, he knew that time was short, but still the way that I think that he did it was pretty worthwhile because he was taking advantage of the situation to the fullest and making the most of it. And you know, me, Bo, and Cody were laughing about how he was he had a pretty good deal as far as pretty much getting what he wanted there coming down to the end. One thing that I thought, you know, I don't necessarily have like a great story, but it's definitely been said by a lot of people who spoke so far today, was I think the value that he made you feel about what you were doing and what you cared about. I think almost anybody can feel that way. If you know the Ortmeyers, you know, most of us don't have the most linear path to where we end up in life. You know, my grandfather, though I never met him, was a Methodist minister. And I believe there was a lot of Methodist ministers in the generations before that. And then all of a sudden, Steve, the oldest of that next generation, comes up and he's a football coach. Lou might have been on his way to being a professor the whole time, but you know, if you look at all the different characters in the Ortmayer family, a lot of us have kind of wandered through our paths and finding out where we're supposed to be, but there wasn't like a set path that we were supposed to have, or a family business, or a real job versus a fake job. You know, because who knows, you know, over the 40 years of Steve coaching, I don't know if there was certainty that that was what he was always going to do until later on, and you know, had really made it. But I think that as all of us, especially for, you know, my generation, and looking at what my cousins have done, what I'm currently doing, I'm a swim coach. There's certainly been plenty of moments of doubt as far as like, can I do this? Is this really what I want to do? But Steve made you believe in yourself. And for somebody who's won a Super Bowl, 2 Super Bowls, been at the height as far as sports, really anything that people on this earth care about, he made you feel like what you were doing was worthwhile and mattered a lot. And as far as having a Super Bowl goes, like, you know, the day before we flew out to Lexington, the team that I coach back home in Virginia, we won a state championship. And it was, you know, like my lifelong dream of like coaching a team to a state championship. And we hadn't even like gotten the trophy yet. They're kind of reading off the scores, and my phone starts buzzing. I look down and Steve's already calling me to congratulate. Like, I'm like, can you let me have like 2 more seconds of enjoying this and actually get the trophy first before you call me? But Steve's already calling me. And, you know, whether it's water polo games or, you know, coming out here to California to see me coach or do things for all those years, you know, I know that he really cared a lot about what I did. I know that he cared a lot about everything that, you know, my cousins and hearing what, you know, from the players that were calling him those last few days. He really did value a lot what everybody was doing. And you couldn't help but feel that like part of it was just, you know, find what your Super Bowl is and pursue it. And he was always going to be there and supporting you. And that's something that like I've definitely picked up on and taken, that I hope that I can just, you know, in his memory, be able to embody just a piece of that. But, you know, Steve was my hero and the person I've looked up to, you know, more than anybody in my entire life. And I'm going to miss him, but like, I'm so thankful for having had him in my life. And I think that's like the nice part when I do feel sad about it. That I'm this fortunate that I had somebody that meant that much. And I know that he was that way for his family, for so many of his players. And so I'm just really thankful.
Okay. All right. I'm excited about seeing all of you, but you're going to go to Stella, right? I'm excited about seeing all of you, but I'm really excited about this next person because we're about to hear from Clay and our foster son, Clayton Russell, and he's calling in from Argentina.
It's a long way.
Clay.
Hello, everyone. It's been a long time, barely 15 years, but you're looking great. For those of you that don't know or don't remember, I became a part of the Ortmayer family when I was about 11 years old in 1981. I happened to just kind of fall into the lap of Stephen Merrily. I had been bouncing around different foster homes, and my social worker decided to place an ad in the newspaper, believe it or not. And guess who answered the ad and actually wanted to take in this nobody who was living basically in a barrio in poverty? I don't know why they did it. Some people believe in coincidence. I believe it was a soul contract. But they took me in, they made me part of their family, and they changed my life forever. They basically introduced me to the world, gave me a huge boost in confidence and self-esteem, and made me part of their family. And I'm always appreciative of that. They have never forgotten me, no matter where I was, no matter how long it's been. They gave me so many opportunities in life. I just can't thank Steve and Marilee and the boys enough. And that's why I'm here to share this.
I don't think you could hear Bo. Bo just said we love you, and you know we do. And
Love you too.
yeah, love you, and we'll talk to you later. Was Ben gonna say something? Ben, you said you were gonna say, no, last call. Is there, well, I don't know if he said, does Mike Chisholm want to talk? Did he tell you he wanted to talk?
Yes.
Oh, all right. So, all right. So again, we seem to collect a lot of family members that aren't always starting out as family, but somehow become family. So Mike and Crystal are part of our Kentucky family. So nice to see you, and go ahead.
Thank you, Marilee. And thank you to everybody for this opportunity to share with you guys. Steve has had a hand in our relationship. He played a little matchmaker and stayed very positive behind us as we endured coaching changes and moves and all the things that relationships go through at coaching relationships and our potential marital relationships go through as they're finding their way. And he seemed to be the cheerleader behind us both, independently of each other, trying to keep us pushed going together. And for that, 14 years later, after being married, we've got three little amigos to show for his efforts. But I wanted to share a story because everybody's kind of talked about his ability to take care of a home and be alert to all those things. When or not, when he came to Kentucky, I was on the previous staff as the DFO, and there was a transition period where I was with Rich and his team and for a while, and then ended up leaving. But he ended up, because Marilee was staying in St. Louis with Cody and finishing Cody through school, he ended up renting my townhouse and hosted Super Bowl parties in my townhouse, as I recall, while I was out of town. But a couple of things I'd left there for him. I said, Steve, this is a plant that is from my grandmother and her funeral. And I want you, just take care of that, make sure, and he goes, okay, no problem. And my grandmother had this plant, and she had put in the plant for decorative purposes, a purple flower or two little purple flowers and they were plastic. And take care of this. And every now and then my wife, Crystal, would come by the house and help him with domestic things, like make sure he had groceries in the house, or make sure he had dinner every now and then. And water the flowers and the plants. And, she said, Steve, are you not taking care of the plant? This was Mike's grandmother's. And he goes, oh no, look at it. It's healthy. She goes, and the plant itself would be wilted, like brown, dying, but it still had these purple flowers. He goes, look, the flowers look beautiful. And so it's got to be doing okay. And so she had to introduce to Steve that the flowers were plastic and they were fake, and it needed to be watered a little more often. So, part of our tribute in our home to Steve is that we will, in one of our plants, we're going to post this plastic purple flower in memory of him, and all the positive thoughts, beautiful thoughts that we have for Steve and Mary Lee and Cody and Bo. And we love you guys and appreciate you. And we'll be thinking about you going forward.
Every day.
Every day.
Okay. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up. We're going to do Derby now, and we're going to eat, and we're going to tell stories and have a wonderful time. So Susan is going to give us a benediction here, and then we'll do Derby, as they say. You get that?
That's some strength in your fingers.
And you're going to mention Scott.
Yes.
Okay, I am.
What a beautiful group of people you all are, you on Zoom and you here. You can tell an incredible life by the incredible group of people that surround someone. Steve had an incredible life, and I am grateful to have been able to spend this afternoon hearing these sacred memories from you. One of the phrases that keeps me going in my own loss is how sorrow can turn with joy. And all of you have shared that in your fun-loving stories and your laughter, but also in your tears. Our sorrow turns with joy. As we prepare to end this time, I invite you to include in your own, I should move up, in your own thoughts and prayers. Oh, you had me there. Sorry. In your own thoughts and prayers, I invite you to include Steve's extended family. Hold up Scott and his family as they make decisions and plans for upcoming open heart surgery. And Scott, may you find yourself absolutely held in the lap of love and prayer. Will you pray with me? Oh God of grace and love, we thank you for the life of Steve Ortmayer. You've heard this group speak their gratitude for Steve's wicked intelligence, for his loyalty, for his care for family and friends, for his generosity, his sense of humor, his competitive spirit. And at the base of all of it has been his deep love. We thank you for creating him and creating him exactly the way he was. We pray that each of us may fully live into who you have created us to be. And so, Holy God, we give you gratitude for your presence, for your deep abiding love, especially in times of loss. And we fall back into your arms, knowing that you will embrace us with your peace. We pray it in love. Amen. Pardon? For benediction, I just want to send you out today to close this formal time with a blessing by a woman named Jan Richardson. Jan Richardson is a woman who understands loss herself and also happens to be a Methodist minister, which just seems absolutely important in the Ortmayer family. So let me share these words from her. In the leaving, in the letting go, let there be this to hold on to at the last: the enduring love, the persisting hope, the remembering of joy, the offering of gratitude, the receiving of grace, and the blessing of peace. May each of you leave here blessed, and may you go out and be a blessing for others. Amen. Thank you, everyone.